Happy Monday, building science geeks. It's me, Mariana Pickering from Emu Passive. We are trying to do these weekly Monday BS sessions, building science, just 5 or 10 minutes talking about some typical questions we get about different building science concepts when we do our passive house builder training. And I will try to kind of break them down into more understandable English for homeowners or for builders just getting into the concept of passive. So if you have any questions about any terminology that's been confusing to you over your journey into advanced building science, please leave those in the comments, and maybe that's something we can talk about next week. So the topic I thought we'd kind of jump into is a fairly simple one, or one that gets spoken about in simple terms, but that can sometimes come with some mythology and some confusion. And that is the topic of thermal bridges, more generally than what we talked about last week, which was the more specific thermal bridge of the FRSI value, or the temperature factor. What I wanted to talk about today instead is just thermal bridges in general. It's something that, we dedicate an entire unit in our training to this. And I think the ability for a designer or a builder to really start to internalize magnitude and the difference between a inconsequential thermal bridge and a really important thermal bridge, that is something that takes some time and experience after seeing many of them modeled to know what's happening with that. So one of the things we like to use is analogies to help understand different learning concepts about advanced building science. So basically, in terms of assessing how big or small a thermal bridge is, it's important to remember that wood and wood products, they do cause thermal bridges. However, they're kind of like mice. Unless you've got a lot of them, like an infestation, then you're probably not too worried about it. Steel and concrete, on the other hand, those are more like the elephant in the room. And that's something that you really need to pay attention to. In all of these cases, thermal bridges are able to be modeled fairly easily early on in the design process before you get on site with finite element calculation. And a lot of building scientists will offer this, this service. And I highly recommend that you engage in that before building. So in order to make passive house cost effective, it's important to understand what kind of thermal bridges have a strong impact on the building's performance and which ones don't. The main concern when evaluating any thermal bridge is whether there's going to be a risk for mold and condensation to occur. So if you take a look at this slide, for example, this is pulled from our Unit 4 on thermal bridges in the Certified Passive House Tradesperson course that we offer. Look at the bottom right, you'll see 2 wall assemblies with the isotherm overlay on there. The isotherm overlay is the result of that finite element software calculation, and it shows the distribution of temperature inside the wall section. So in the isotherm view, the red indicates heat, the blue means cold. And if you look at the assemblies there below, you can infer that the red would be on the warm interior side of the building, assuming this is in a cold environment, while the blue area would be on the outside, exposed to the external environment. So in the middle of the 2 wall sections, these 2 rainbow things, you see these black lines, and each one represents the same temperature inside the wall section. In an ideal scenario, those lines, the isotherm lines, would be exactly straight. That would mean there's no interference caused by thermal bridges at all. So anytime there is a thermal bridge that causes an interference in the distribution of the internal temperature of the section, it kind of bumps or bends or disturbs those black lines. So the more disturbed or bent your black isotherm lines are, the bigger the thermal bridge. So if you look at the 2 we have there, we've got a wood stud isotherm on the left, and you see they're slightly curved in the middle. That means that the wood stud does have an impact on the internal temperature distribution inside the wall. However, it's not very pronounced. On the other hand, you see on the right side an isotherm view associated with a steel stud. And in this simulation, the isotherm lines fan out quite a bit, substantially in the middle of the wall. That's a large disruption due to steel being a superconductive material. So that causes a bigger thermal bridge. And this is a pretty simple comparison order of magnitude wise, where are you going to put your attention and your money in trying to mitigate thermal bridges? You would put it on that elephant on the right, not on the mouse on the left. So in terms of assessing how big or small a thermal bridge is, remember that wood and wood products, they do cause thermal bridges, but they're like mice. Unless you have a large number of them, like an infestation, you can coexist with mice and move on. By contrast, anything metal, steel, concrete, it's going to act more like an elephant. And these are large thermal bridges that you can't ignore. You won't be able to live with them. Take, for example, the steel stud shown here. If you received that isotherm back from your energy modeler or building science consultant, a good passive house builder would see that as a big red flag. One way to check to see if a thermal bridge is a mouse or an elephant is to see if it passes what Passive House calls the hygiene criteria. And the way to do that is you look at the FRSI value or the temperature factor, which we talked about last week on Monday BS. So if you're not sure what that is, please go to our channel and look for the playlist, the Monday BS playlist, and check out last week's conversation. So you look at the FRSI value of that thermal bridge and you compare that to the climate specific requirements set by Passive House performance criteria for that particular project. So thanks for joining me, everyone, for another Monday BS. And if you have any other building science questions burning in your brain, let me know in the comments and maybe we can talk about that next week. Thanks. Bye.